Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, with our main topic today. We're discussing today that the Heritage Committee of the Islamic World Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization have approved the registration of the Egyptian Museum in Tahrir, the city of Shali in Siwa Oasis, and also the Baron Palace in Heliopolis on its heritage list. This came after Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities has submitted integrated files and the needed papers that shed light on these archaeological and artistic importance of these sites, as well as their architectural elements. The ministry also has presented reports on the state of the site's preservation. To shed more light on this, we have the pleasure to host this morning in the breakfast show Mr. Sayyid Ali Taha, the tour guide. Good morning, Mr. Taha.
Good morning.
Well, Mr. Taha, could you give us an idea or elaborate more on the importance of the monumental sites that are registered on the heritage site by the Heritage Committee? Not specifically these sites, but what is the importance of registering any sort of or any kind of sites in any country?
Yeah. According to the law of the antiquities here in Egypt, each building which had passed more than 100 years,
yes,
it's considered to be a kind of antiquities or monuments. Regarding the Egyptian Museum, was inaugurated in 1901, so more than almost 120 years old, the building itself. And according to the historical sites in the Ministry of Antiquities, that building was constructed to be or to serve as a museum. We have some museums in other countries being like palaces or being like historical buildings and then was reformed into museums. But this building being constructed to be as a museum from the beginning. The work started in 1897 and then was inaugurated in 1901 by one of the famous Egyptologists and archaeologists, Auguste Mariette. This is not the first museum that we have in Egypt. We had another museum in Bulak, nearby where we are nowadays. I mean, near
today, yes,
today, Maspero.
Yes.
This building being flooded by the Nile flood with the passing of time, and then the collection of the artifacts being moved.
The Museum of Bulak, that was the museum where the kings and queens of the came from Luxor, and it rested there at first, and then it was transferred to the old Egyptian Museum in Tahrir, isn't it?
Before to the Egyptian
during
Museum,
the era of
they've been moved to
King Fuad.
Yeah, they've
yes,
been moved firstly during the time of Abbas the second,
yes,
Abbas Hilmi,
okay,
to the zoo. Where is the zoo nowadays?
Yes,
Giza, yeah, nearby the Cairo University, and then been waiting for the construction of the new building, what we call it nowadays Tahrir Museum, and they've been moved there. And all the masterpieces of the building at that time, before the discovery of the tomb of King Tutankhamun, because the King Tutankhamun was discovered in 1922. Some people, they say, as you are going to move all these antiquities from the actual museum in Tahrir Square to the new gem or the Grand Egyptian Museum nearby the pyramids area, what will be the importance of this museum? By the way, this museum will be very important as well as the Grand Egyptian Museum, because for those people who like to follow the development and the progress of the art in ancient Egyptian time, they're going to follow the artifacts from the pre-dynastic time, before the first dynasty, up to the Greco-Roman era. Especially, there are some masterpieces in the museum will be there, like that famous statue of Khafre and the other small statue of Cheops. a statue in the image of King Senefru, all the antiquities of the new kingdom, like King Tutmosis, King Amenhotep II, some parts dedicated to that famous lady, Queen Hatshepsut, and of course the colossal of Akhenaten, the famous ones in the Egyptian Museum. And will be some artifacts of jewelry as well, will be in the Egyptian, the actual Tahrir Museum. Those jewelries came from Tanis. This is very important because it's so famous, the jewelries of King Tutankhamun, but this one equal to King Tutankhamun. We have a coffin of gold, we have another coffin of silver, we have a mask, not that big like the one of King Tutankhamun, and we have a big collection in the second floor of the Egyptian Museum. Nearby where is the golden mask of King Tutankhamun. When you get to the Egyptian Museum and you will see the golden mask of Tutankhamun, to the left of that hall there is another hall dedicated to those jewelries of the Tanis. That was discovered by a French scholar in 1940. Wasn't that famous because at that time we had the Second World War, so this discovery wasn't announced enough and wasn't advertised enough to be known as or renowned as the discovery of the King Tutankhamun.
Yes.
That's why the Egyptian Museum being registered in this committee.
Yes. So does it only goes back to the the pieces, the valuable pieces and historical pieces in the Egyptian Museum, or also because of the architecture of the building itself?
Of course,
also?
The design and
Could
the
you
style.
give us an idea concerning the architecture of the?
Yeah. This museum, the building, I mean the architectural design of the building itself, it's a combination of the Greco-Roman and Gothic art. It's a kind of European art was appeared in the 17th century AD. We call it Gothic art. And if you face the facade of the museum, you will see a combination between a face of the goddess Hathor, the beauty and motherhood goddess in ancient Egyptian time, accompanied by Aphrodite, the famous goddess of the Greek-Roman time. And you will see some Latin inscriptions talking about the different eras of the ancient Egyptian history. And also the date of the opening and the establishing of the museum, it's written in Roman numbers. When we put some letters to indicate, for example, for 1 or 2 up to what we need to do. Also the name of the leader of Egypt at that time, Abbas Helbi, it's written in Latin, and the Hijra calendar is registered as well. The building itself, nowadays there are a lot of restoration and a lot of reconstructions in some parts going on, because we get back to the original color of the time of the foundation of that museum. There is a big storeroom underneath of the first floor of the museum, or under the ground, that was full of antiquities. Nowadays, there are a kind of, let's say, rediscovering of those antiquities that have been kept there for a long time, and a lot of activities going on to get some collections to move it to the new gem or the Grand Egyptian Museum nearby the pyramids area. Yes. So not only what is inside the museum, but it's the building itself and the design and the style of the building more than 120 years old, so it's considered to be a kind of heritage. Yes. And we are waiting to be kind of registered by UNESCO, not only by the Arabic Committee.
Yes. Yeah. So concerning the Baron Palace in Heliopolis, could you give us an idea about it?
You can ask anyone in his way heading to the airport. What he can see. This is a unique building in between what buildings surround it.
Yes.
That gentleman, Baron Mbian, was very, very intelligent one at that time, because before he started the building of the new district in Cairo,
More than 100 years ago,
yeah,
of course.
that was in 1907 when he started the construction of his
Yes.
palace there. He arranged a tramway avenue like I know to facilitate the
transportation.
Transportation between the downtown area or the city
Yes.
center, and this area at that time was a kind of desertic area.
Desert,
and
yes.
was very abundant. The end of Cairo was ended up to what we call it nowadays Abbasiyya or Tahrir
yes.
at that time. That's why the name Abbasiyya derived from the name of Abbas Hilmi II. And he arranged this before the starting of the foundation of the city or the new era or the new district of Cairo at that time. Nowadays, when you go to, especially to that famous place, Roxy, you will find very, very interesting building with that, design of the old design that dated back to the time of the founder. Also, that basilica there is
The
very,
church,
very a church,
a very famous church
very
there.
famous one, and it's a unique building as well. All this we consider it as a kind of heritage. Nowadays, after the restoration and the renovation of the palace to get back to the original color, and it served like a museum, when it was inaugurated about a year ago, was very, very full of and very busy due those circumstances that we have nowadays with COVID-19. But although those circumstances, we had many people who visited that museum, and is still on. The garden of the museum now serves like a new, like a kind of museum, an open-air museum, talking about Heliopolis, or what we call it Misr al-Jadida in Arabic language. So you will go there, you will find a wagon of this tramway exhibited there in the garden. And the garden, we can use it for some celebrations and some conferences. And what we are doing nowadays, the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, from time to time, you will find a kind of festivals and celebrations there. And one of those celebrations and festivals was an invitation to all the ambassadors of the foreign countries here in Egypt by the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities there. Was a kind of propaganda, a kind of advertising Egypt through what we have of our culture heritage, like this palace.
Yes. So concerning Mr. Taha, concerning the restorations work that took place recently, a year ago, in the Baron Palace, could you give us an idea about the importance of the restorations of any monument in Egypt or antiquities that could add value or could drive the government or the tourism ministry to cancel this monument from the list here in Egypt? Give us an idea about this, the importance of restorations.
Of course, when we start restoration, and I want to add something here regarding a very, very known palace nearby Tahrir Square, Champion, where Champion lived. This, in the Champion Street, there is a palace need to be restored as well. So maybe somebody will hear us through this renowned program, and they will give them attention to this palace as well. The restoration in Baron Palace started a long time. The inauguration was about a year ago, but they started about 3 years before. They wanted to get back to the original color of the building and to strengthen some columns and some parts of the ceiling, because as you know, the palace it's 3 floors. The first floor were some rooms for the servants and those people who are taking care to serve the Baron.
We have photos for the Baron Palace now.
And look at that
the old
design
picture, and this was before the restoration.
Before the restoration and then after the restoration. The design was of one of the famous architects. His name is Marcel. He was a French architect who designed this, and he designed it in an Indian architectural style. This was something very different from what's surrounded by the palace itself. Nowadays it's very known place, and you can follow the history of Heliopolis, or what we call it Misr al-Jadida, through what exhibited there of photos and some artifacts, gives you an idea in general about this. Restoration, it's very important in antiquities, because to maintain those antiquities in a good condition, you need to do this restoration from time to time, not only one time and then you give up. No, it's continuing. Up till now, you will find some people working and cleaning and renovating and so on. And from time to time, they'll do some examination for the painting itself. We can see this when we go to Upper Egypt, to Luxor or to Dandara, that they are injecting some liquid to strengthen the stones with the passing of time. And this is very good example is the Sphinx of Giza.
If you would like to describe the Baron Palace, the windows, the Indian architecture that we see.
Yeah, as you can see, this tall tower, it's considered to be a very unique tower, as you can see, and the different terraces and balconies. The facade itself, it's a massive entrance with those arches, and this type of architecture is very, very different from what we have in the Arabic architecture. We know the Islamic architecture in general. This is very known as, Indian architecture, and we know that famous Taj Mahal there. Even Taj Mahal is very different from this place.
Now we move to Shali city in Siwa.
Yeah. Shali, it's ecology place. Siwa in general, there are a lot of tourists, they like to move there. Even they have very few antiquities, some small tombs, and the famous temple, what was visited by Alexander the Great when he came to Egypt 320 years BCE.
Now we have the pictures of the city.
The city, it's constructed...
If you would like to describe on the pictures.
Yeah, the city, that's the famous tower of that Atiq mosque. It's called the Atiq in Arabic language means old or ancient. That mosque was inaugurated in 2015, and also the buildings around it's kind of fortress surrounded by a very known wall, enclosure wall, and this enclosure wall was in a zigzag form, not a straight wall. All of this building constructed of the natural mud brick mixed with salt. And as you know, there are some springs of water, of salt water, natural water, like kind of sulfate, salt. And when you mix this with the mud, it makes it very strong. It seems like stones. That is the natural material that used in the construction. And this fortress, or Shali fortress, dated back to the 12th century AD, and it's still in a good condition after the restoration. And the restoration is going on, not finished yet, because they restored another mosque nearby, Al-Atiq Mosque, there. And there is a small museum talking about the artifacts and the artisans that you can see in, so famous in Siwa, especially those colorful dresses and the collars and pectorals of silver, and the bracelets and all the earrings that used by the local people there. Siwa as an oasis, it's so famous with olives and dates. This is very recommended. If you go there, you will try to have a taste of those olives that they use there, especially the olive oil is very known in Siwa. Shali, we can consider it one of the oldest city of the Arabic time or the medieval time in Egypt. And you can walk nowadays through those buildings. The city itself at the time of the founder was just one gate. As I told you,
Yes.
that was constructed as a forest or as a citadel. That's why it was one gate. And then 100 years later, I mean in the 1400 AD, they added another door. And later on, they added one door more. They considered to be the door for the ladies when
It
they
seems
get
a very
out.
big, wide city.
It is about an acre of distance. That was constructed in this form because, as you know, they lived in a desertic area, abandoned, and they want to protect themselves from those people or from
Yes.
the wild animals around the area as well. That's why it was constructed as a kind of fortress, as you can see there. Nearby the area, there is little tombs dated back to the 26th dynasty, some of the antiquities as well. Two of these tombs are very full of colorful scenes and reliefs inside.
Yes.
And of course, nearby the Hebes temple that was dedicated to god Amen, and later on during the Greco-Roman time was identified with Zeus, the Greek god. That's why he was visited by Alexander the Great. Mm-hmm. And where he went there, he got the prophecy that he is not the son of Philip, he is the son of Zeus or Ammon Zeus. And then we knew that he sent a letter to his mother telling her, now I know who is my father in reality. Yeah.
Yes, I thank you very much for your valuable information, and we hope that other monuments in Egypt and antiquities would be registered on the list of the Heritage Committee and also in the UNESCO,
Yeah.
as the Tourism Ministry is exerting efforts for this.
Yeah.
I thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
time
Thank
and
you,
for coming today. Mr. Syed Ali Taha, the tour guide, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for following me. I'm Amal Mukhtar. I leave you with other segments coming up next in the Breakfast Show.